nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. Fun time had by all. I'm Petey Rave, and here with me is my team, my squad, my crew, my triumvirate. We've got David Majors, aka DJM.
Buenos tacos, muchachos. I just discovered, since we're staying in the early 2000s, obscure web animated series Bonus Stage put up a brand new episode for its 20th anniversary in 2004.
Dope.
They put a new episode.
Dope. And, of course, Drew Snyder.
Wow. Listening to this record for review, I couldn't stop thinking of things like Megas XLR and Reboot, so it's a good time.
Ooh.
Spoilers.
It was a beautiful time. We're here to talk about album. We're here to talk about music, and we're the provider of the album this week is David. David, what have you brought forth for us this week?
I brought PD Rave, Record Breakers listeners and fans, an album that I was very fortunate to come across all the way back in the year of our Lord 2001. Flashback to the days of anime not being as easily accessible as it is now, except for a block on Cartoon Network called Toonami. Toonami was here to build a better cartoon show and gave you a block of the best action cartoons that money could buy.
Yeah.
And along with the block itself, it continued the tradition of animation blocks having their own unique bumpers and interstitials and outros and intros and all this sort of stuff. And in particular, Toonami's started in 1997 with Maltar, the producer from Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and then they went into outer space. And we saw the debut of the Toonami Operations module called Time aboard the spaceship Absolution, broadcasting action cartoons across the universe. And one of their in-house musicians at Cartoon Network in Atlanta was a gentleman by the name of Joe Boyd Vigil, and he specialized in drum and bass music. And you've probably heard what the kids call breakcore nowadays, and it's clear influence from drum and bass, and you'll see somebody say only Toonami. That's where this kind of started. This was the genesis of the only Toonami meme, and it is 2001's Toonami Deep Space Bass.
Oh. Drew, what were your a two-part question? What were your memories of Toonami, and what were your expectations coming into this album?
My memories of Toonami are like varied, right? I remember it feeling really cool to be able to like get home from school, right, and have like this block of stuff sort of waiting and to be excited about it. And I mean, like a lot of people, I think I'll be honest, it was my first introduction into the anime, as it were, your Japanese cartoons such as Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, all that sort of stuff. But then also, like, we were talking about it before we hit go. They were the ones who saved Reboot. They were like all that sort of stuff. And I remember sort of the feel of Toonami. I didn't necessarily like thinking of music from Toonami didn't really click with me what I was going to get, but I remember the feeling, and it was that very late 90s, early 2000s feel to it. So I was like, okay, it's probably going to be a little bit like ambient-y stuff of that nature. The level of that I was unsure of, but I figured it was going to be something in that realm.
Yeah. For me, the memories of Toonami are very sporadic, and like I don't think I have a continuation. You know, most of my memories are very sporadic. But it's cool to kind of like think about like all the different times I would just tune into Toonami, and there would just be a smattering of a bunch of cartoons, and like even looking at 2001, I'm having here. I have like several that I'm looking at the names. I'm like, I should probably actually sit down and get to know, expand my anime horizons with some of this stuff. Like just in 2001, they have listed the heavily censored Outlaw Star. They have the original Dragon Ball that they aired there after they'd already done Dragon Ball Z. I think that's when they introduced these. Just the Big O was in 2001. Card Captors, Mobile Suit Gundam, the 08th MS Team, Mobile Suit Gundam 0080 War in the Pocket. We have Zoids, the New Century, and we have Batman Beyond. And then the next year they also introduced Hamtaro, which is, you know,
God, Hamtaro! Oh my God!
Because of course.
Things got weird.
Yes, introduced Hamtaro and GI Joe. Which, you know, why not?
I like how you can see Amber Blur dancing to the Hamtaro theme song as she sings it. That's funny to me.
It was going to be interesting to kind of like dive into this. I figured it was going to be. I think I was expecting a little bit more remixes, but I was intrigued to find out what kind of like sound we were going to get. Because I don't know if I knew or had like a clear mental picture of what to expect as far as like what to recall as far as the interstitial music and stuff like that. So it was going to be intriguing to like sit down and listen to. But yeah, David, how would you describe this album musically?
I will say, as someone who was injected with the anime strain, if you will, Toonami was very, very core in my teenage years, and just a big, big part of my life. It was big. So a lot of these songs, when I first bought this CD, they were already etched into my head. You'll hear the occasional sample from one of the series' songs, but then it transitions into drum and bass, splicing samples, maybe a touch of a little Aphex Twinish, a teensy tiny bit, just not as in your face and intense, but still very much in that drum and bass kind of feel, just a little faster than that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are the occasional techno songs too that just kind of keep that steady, not quite danceable, but almost kind of vibe, because the whole album is very subdued in its vibe, and it all just kind of keeps that whole in outer space vibe going.
Mm-hmm. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, this era of music, I forget sometimes how good some of it is, like from a musical standpoint, because so much of it, if you think back, was the music that was in the background of everything that we cared about, right? Wipeout Fusion, Intelligent Cube, Battle Arena Toshinden, Toonami, like that whole era, right? Like this sort of like
These are
ambient.
a few of my favorite things.
It's like that milieu, right? It's that mid to late 90s, early aughts era of like video games and computers and like music and all of that, right? And there's this ambient drum and bass music that's there. there is like a lot of intricate beats and a lot of cool samples, which we'll definitely get into. There's a few times I heard something very specific. There is this bass, that the tone of the bass is something, there was a lot of it, right? But the tonality specifically, it wasn't about how loud it could be. There was a rumble and a low end that just permeated the entire thing, right? It wasn't about blowing out your subs and like making your hair stand on end with your ridiculous subwoofers in the back. Some people used it for that, but like that wasn't what this was. But there was also, you're dealing with Gundam, you're dealing with Dragon Ball, you're dealing with Sailor Moon. There is songs on here and there is melodies that feel very big and very grandiose and very intricate, but still have that underlying like drum and bass sort of rumble to them, which was really, really cool to go back to and really, really good to feel again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like harkening back to like when I would used to like download long like drum and bass and techno and IDM mixes, not just EDM, but if anybody remembers the IDM movement.
Intelligent dance music.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Like and those like mixes like Frisky Radio back in the day, but they had like essentially like a podcast that was just, you would get, it was a podcast feed where they would feed you just a 2-hour mix, like DJ mix, like of techno music every periodically, and it was fantastic. And this is definitely like that. This is like very cool, very vibey. Has a lot of really nice really nice bass sounds, really nice variety in the kind of like in kind of like where it goes and where it travels musically, like the it does kind of have a little bit of like the musical identities of some of the shows of the days, but it's kind of like harkens back to one of the things that that harkens back to is like that perfect like music for those moments in that time, like those video game music, PS1 PS2 video game music, the soundtrack to discovering new shows and finally figuring out what this anime thing was about, and like I was like, what the hell is this? What you telling me? What's an anime? And trying to figure out
Japanese anime.
Trying to figure out
what is anime.
Trying to figure out which Tenchi Muyo series this episode is from, and then maybe giving up because you've missed a few weeks. Like it's like, you know, I whatever. I just watched this episode and I'm just gonna enjoy it. And it's a soundtrack to all those like moments, and it's just but on its own, it's a very like cool, vibey, comfortable soundtrack. It's almost like chill drum and bass tracks to study and chill to, almost in a way. But it works well like that, and it just kind of is good to have over here on the screen and in your headphones while you're kind of like hurriedly trying to finish uploading last week's episode before you record this week's episode. You know,
you're doing great, Petey.
Much like that. But yeah, it has a lot of those like really, really great tones, really great sounds. It work really well. But yeah, let's get into the key tracks of those songs and those shows and those moments. David, what would be the key tracks to zeroing on?
I will let Drew do what he does, and I will move on to track number 5, Information Leak. This is one that I remembered and recognized immediately. Also, right after that, the song Gundams Are on Earth. That one was the lead into my favorite Toonami show, Gundam Wing. And track 6, Arabic. The beat was a little off kilter until all of it really starts to kick in, and it builds into something really fun with a really interesting sample to it. I think that was for Dragon Ball Z. D&B Remix was a personal favorite of mine for a long, long time. It was for the Toonami Midnight Run, for those scoring at home. Track 9, Tension. That little bit of Japanese string that was sampled from Tenchi, and then it getting warped into a sample that breaks into a beat. Just really, really interesting stuff going on there. And track 12, Puffin Bass, where it took the drum beat from the Powerpuff Girls theme song and gave it its natural evolution into a drum and bass track, and it's really, really fun.
Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
The one, I will always do the Drew thing. The robo voice, the hi-hat rhythm, the low hum of the spaceship as you're getting into Toonami, like in Ignition, all of that felt great. And a lot of techno is samples and like soundscapes, I feel like. So it's where most of this is coming from. The Anvil snare remix, the choppy synths sounding like layers. At 118, there's some insane instrument layering that's really, really good. And then, like, probably a minute afterwards, you start hearing a lot of, like, backmasking of instrumentation, which is great. And I will also mention Puffin Bass. Yes, it's the Powerpuff Girls drum bit, which also, I have always thought this. The Amun-Ra, or the Amon bass riff that is used in a lot of samples in techno and early hip hop, that you hear at the beginning of Powerpuff Girls, that you hear at the beginning of a lot of like late 80s, early 90s hip hop, and that you hear in a lot of drum and bass stuff, the really quick bass line there. The Amon bass really is the Wilhelm scream for
I'm on
bald head
bass.
music dorks. Ha ha ha, funny. But it is just a Wilhelm scream for music dorks of the 80s and 90s, and I'm kind of okay with that. It's like, oh, they did the thing. They did the thing. Just like the it's like, okay, got you. I hear you. You know your roots. Understood. Is sort of where that goes.
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it. I will. The only thing I really need to add is that this is the moment I accidentally read Puffin Bass and thought it said Puffin Pass. And it was like, I just had that moment.
I think that this album wouldn't be bad.
And also shout out the 13th track, which is actually Hyperspace, because but is actually mislabeled as Dark Knight, which is one of those like interesting things of like they were asked to change the track, but all the labels had already been printed, so it's labeled one thing, but it's actually a whole other track, and it's for the Toonami in-flight movies, which is an interesting little trivia tidbit. And also, I would like to hear. I don't know if it's available somewhere. The Dark Knight one probably is available somewhere to listen to. I'll have to look that up on my own. But yeah, let's bring it back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. Drew, what would your conclusion be on this album as a whole?
This album for certain nerds will automatically put you back to a time and a place. There is not one bit of me that, if I closed my eyes, didn't picture sitting on my floor, getting the latest PlayStation demo disc, and throwing in a couple of games, or coming home from school and catching an episode of Reboot. It makes me want to go back and revisit some of those old shows and figure out, is it my nostalgia goggles that says Megas XLR is one of the best cartoons ever, or are the children right and it's lame and old?
Well, knowing what I know about the kids that like the giant robots now, there is a great bit of reverence for Megas XLR.
Really
That's
good.
cool.
Everyone likes giant robots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting time in music, and an interesting time in cartoons. This album, I think one of the reasons I didn't really have a lot of tracks, the key tracks, was that you guys pretty much covered a lot of the key ones to talk about. And then I think this album is really cool and really fun. I think it's it kind of is just a nice mega mix of really cool drum and bass and techno beats that kind of you consume as a whole, and kind of goes from track to track, and you kind of find moments where oh, that's cool, that's really cool, that's really cool. And I think it didn't for me, it didn't be oh, this specific track was what I kept remembering overall, but all of it was really cool and really, really, really vibe well, and really, really well constructed from a production standpoint, and the drum fills and the bass lines were really dope, and it created really cool atmosphere, and harkening back to a time, and make me look through the Toonami Wikipedia article and see the history of the past, the near past, and then the present, which because of course Toonami still exists. It's out there, just under Adult Swim. You go out there, you can, I believe.
Although there is a Toonami block on Friday nights now as well.
Mm-hmm. I believe they have part of it is, I'm looking at Rick and Morty the anime that's as part of that that whole thing.
Better or worse?
Better or worse. It also, looking at this reminds me that I need to go back and finish Space Dandy.
Oh yeah,
to finish.
Wonderful anime.
So it's a really good one. It's fantastic. Yeah. David, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
Speaking purely on the music alone, I think it is a nice little reprieve, I will say, from how loud and cacophonous so much music is now. It's a breather of an album. It stays in one particular kind of bubble, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. If you dig drum and bass, this may be something you want to check out. And at the end of the day, it's not very long. You'll hear some interesting sampling, and it might be a fun time. If you watched Toonami as a kid, maybe not to the point like me where you were doing panels talking about Toonami at conventions, but you watched Toonami as a kid, you might enjoy this because it has those things that may not register immediately in your mind, but they're somewhere back in your subconscious, and it just might hit that part of your brain to give you a really strong hit of nostalgia. And it's a little bit of vibey techno and some drum and bass. And you might have some fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those are our thoughts on the deep space base. From your boys at Toonami and from good old Joe. Now we get to the main event of the evening, the moment we've all been waiting for. Our haiku reviews, where we sum it all up in poetic form with the 575. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haiku numero uno. Drew, what is your haiku?
Oh, going back, PSX era, and I wish I could go back. Wipeout, Bridge Racer.
Bridge Racer!
Love that soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. My haiku. Yeah. Harkens back to times watching cartoons old and new with robot friend Tom. And last but not least, David, what is your haiku?
Drum and bass from space. Core memories are unlocked. Still pretty chill, though.
Mm-hmm. And those are our thoughts on Deep Space Base. You cannot find it on our Spotify playlist, but you will find it on our YouTube playlist. To listen and to do your due diligence and your due diligence. So you can go ahead and check it there on YouTube. We'll try to link the playlist in the YouTube description and in the show notes at recordbreakers.fun. On those playlists, on both of them, ideally, you'll probably find next week's record, and it's going to be provided by Drew. Drew, what have you got for us next week?
Well, it's a band that, like a lot of bands, I feel like, how did we not do them before? And it's a band with a weird instrument. I found them first, actually, probably during this era, during a competition on a TV show known as Road Rules, with their violin player doing backflips off of tables. We're gonna do Ocean Avenue by Yellowcard.
Nice. All right, though that's for next week, and this is this week. And you can of course find us all over the internet. Recordbreakers.fun is the website. You can find all the episodes and show notes and the RSS feed to be able to, if you want to just take it to your favorite podcast aggregator, if you will, to subscribe to the podcast. You can of course find us on Rebelli TV on YouTube to watch all the VODs, watch the video version of the show and our YouTube playlist. You can find us on Twitch, where we stream ourselves recording the podcast. You can come hang out with us, check us out live. You can find us everywhere you find podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and whatever other place you can think of. Yeah, check us out everywhere. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Oodle toot.
Bye-bye.
Annyeong. Fighting.
Crying nut.
Hiya.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.